Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast, when work doesn't feel like work, as somebody quoted recently about us. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by my one and only, well, actually not one and only, because there's three of us.
But Christine will get mad to hear you say
exactly. The one and only Efrain Rosario. Hey, Efrain.
Hey, Daniel, I don't mind sharing you with Christine, so it's all good. Lovely to be here as always.
I don't mind sharing you with Christine either. It's a pleasure. And how are you? All good?
Good. It's a sunny day in otherwise chilly Central Europe, but yeah, no complaints. No complaints. I'm sure it's not quite as warm as it is in your part of the world, though.
It's good. It's decent. Where Barca is back in top of the league as well, which is good because a month ago that seemed impossible. So yeah, life's good, and we have we just came from our flagship event, Candid Commerce, the one in London for the first time, and we have like some quite cool things coming up in the next few months. I'm gonna be where am I gonna be? In Las Vegas for Shop Talk. I think I'm gonna be at Stratacash's What's in Store event end of March in London as well. Retail Media X in London in May. So catch me if you can. What about you, Efrain? Any exciting plans?
So I think I will be in London, back in London again at the Food and Beverage Digital Summit in early March. Would love to hear more about the Stratacash event. Is this something that's near and dear to my job as well? And then I think we'll be together again probably in early June, right? For Shop Talk in Europe.
Absolutely. That will be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that. And I can confidentially, although this will not be confidential anymore, disclose that we have some very cool activations planned as FMCG Guys. Reach out to me personally if you want to know more about it. That's the room you'll want to be in, basically, if you're in FMCG or retail.
The room where it happens, to quote Hamilton.
Where it happens, and it won't only be a room. We'll actually be using some cool mediums of transport as well.
Excellent. Well, that's a teaser if I've ever heard one, Daniel.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a spaceship yet, but it will be quite cool. So I think we were talking just before we started recording that today is the first episode we're going to do about R&D. And Efrain, as somebody that's been in the industry for a while, I wanted to ask you, what's your perception of R&D within an FMCG company?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that, in my mind, they tend to be the individuals within a company that are really kind of on the foreground or the forefront with regards to where consumers are going. So I think, if you wanted to talk to anybody within your organization that has a view on the future of fill in the blank, R&D is a great place to go. I would also say, just from my own personal experience, it tends to be quite an exciting space. The interactions that I've had at companies where I've worked with the R&D team, you get exposed to some really cool stuff. Some of it which sees the light of day and some of it which doesn't, but all exciting nevertheless.
Yeah, and it's an interesting community. I did a couple of roles in my recruitment career in R&D, and it's an interesting bunch of people. I actually stay in touch with some people from back then, and I'm talking like 12 years ago that I did that search.
Yeah, and I would say, maybe the way to paraphrase what I was saying before, which is that they make great dinner guests, right? Because they probably have some really interesting stories to share.
Oh, well, there we go. We'll have to ask our guest about them. Our guest, which is no other than Federico Pasquini, who's the Global R&D Innovation Director for International Family Care and Professional at the leader in fabrics, Kimberly-Clark. Hey, Federico, good to see you again.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me today. Excited to join the podcast today and to talk about R&D.
How are things in your part of the world? I know that you're based in central London.
Yeah, good. I have to say, it's been a pretty hectic start to the year, which is very good. But yeah, as we've come together as a new organization at the end of last year, yeah, we've got some interesting challenges ahead of us. Where yeah, in R&D we can clearly play a big role.
That's great. Well, I was seeing before that you've been in London for like 10 years already.
Yeah, actually, it's 10 years in the UK this year. In London, probably 7 years since I joined Kimberly-Clark. Because yeah, before joining Kimberly-Clark, I was working for Unilever, in a pretty big global R&D center in the north of the UK, where I was working on global laundry innovations. Yeah, and then I joined Kimberly-Clark and joined the magic world of tissue.
And how is it to live in London? Do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, for some reason, I think it's a place I always wanted to move to and live in. And so far, yeah, it's lived up to the expectations. I think, yeah, it's a very big city. It can be pretty hectic, chaotic, but yeah, I find it fascinating and stimulating.
Yeah, it is very big, but it is true that the distances are huge. But if you take the tube from one part of London to another, you can find like it's very different to be in Mayfair than to be in Brixton, for example.
No, absolutely. I think you can enjoy the difference, and then each neighborhood has its own soul and peculiarities. Which, yeah, even if it's a big city, you also have like small villages within the big city, which is one of the things that I like about London.
Yeah, Ephraim's a big fan of London, by the way. So
I am indeed. I actually will have to catch you after the episode to ask you how it's been in terms of like, somebody who was wanted to live in London for quite some time, whether it's lived up to the expectations. So I'll definitely have to hit you up on that later after the pod.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've got plenty of tips and stories.
The things to avoid as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, I have to say, I'm coming to the conclusion that definitely, I mean, I prefer big cities because, of course, I've been living in London for the last 7 years, but also I lived in Mumbai for a few years, which, I mean, that's extremely chaotic. And, but I miss that place.
Bombay is one of my favorite cities, I have to say. So I'd probably live in Bombay before living in London, if I had to choose.
When I had to move and come back to what I think was Europe, but actually I came back to the UK, which it's no longer Europe. I have to say I was pretty sad. I had an amazing time in Mumbai, or Bombay, as you call it.
Yeah, as the locals call it.
I know.
So Federico, and you kind of you touched on this in one of your earlier comments about living in Mumbai. Your career has kind of taken you around the world, right? To some extent, right? In terms of like going, I think if you could just kind of tell us a little bit. But you sound like you started in Europe, and then you made your way to Mumbai. And now back in this part of the world with London. But can you tell us a little bit more about, your background, both at Kimberly-Clark, but also at Unilever?
Yeah, sure. So I've been for 20 years plus in the FMCG world, and I started at Unilever and then moved to Kimberly-Clark 7 years ago. And mainly I've been working in innovation roles, global, regional innovations, R&D, packaging, product. Started in Italy, working for household care, moved to India at some point, working still for global household care, then UK, Unilever Laundry, and then Kimberly-Clark more recently, where I joined what was called the family care regional unit for EMEA, focusing on dry bath tissue, facial tissue, household care, and more recently, took over this role of global R&D innovation director for family care and professional, which is a combination of our family care business and our business to business part of the business. But yeah, so I think my career has been focusing mainly on innovation, product, packaging, like I said, with a short stint in marketing, because also at some point I had the curiosity to do an experience in global marketing. I don't know whether you know a brand which is very iconic in the UK called Domestos. It's a Unilever brand for household care. It's a toilet cleaner, bleach. And I spent 12 months as a global brand manager for Domestos. I have to say, fantastic experience in terms of getting closer to consumers, which, that's a bit of a common thread across my experience. Having the opportunity to work closely with some of the senior business stakeholders, developing a stronger business acumen. But also, I have to say that was a big milestone for me, because that's also what made me realize that my passion is for product innovation. And that's why I came back to R&D, and I've been in R&D and enjoying my R&D roles since then.
And when you say that you've specialized in like innovation and product packaging, what does that mean?
I think, I've seen R&D people actually specializing either in product or in packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit, again, it's a bit my story, because I wanted to stretch a bit myself and expand my knowledge, learning, and have an impact across different formats. And that's why I started with packaging. But then my experience in India, for example, was the first time that I was leading an R&D team, setting up and leading an R&D team that was working across packaging and formulation. When I worked in the laundry category, I was developing formulation products together with my team. And today my main focus is on product. So I touched all of the touch points, if you like. And in the end, like I said, it's really about being human-centric, consumer-focused, identifying that pain point that you need to solve for, and then design product experience that solve for that problem.
And
go ahead, Daniel.
No problem. What do you like all in all about working in R&D for an FMCG company? Because you even worked in marketing, right? So what did you really like about it?
So I am a mechanical engineer by background, right? So I love science. I love connecting science to the solution of real problems. And in a way, this is what I'm doing on a daily basis. But it's finding that solution that then makes an impact on consumers, environment, and business. So I think the consumer bit, I find extremely satisfying when I go to a supermarket and I see on shelf a product that I have developed with my team, right? I still remember, so my very first project, that was packaging innovation, and that was the relaunch globally of the Sif cream packaging, which is still, that packaging, that bottle, that cap, it's still on shelf in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, I think. But the first time that I saw that bottle on shelf in Turkey, that was the first market where we launched, I think that was a moment where, I was like, okay, proud of what I've done, and interesting that actually, this has become reality, and there will be people who hopefully are going to enjoy that new packaging and finding it more convenient, and it's going to make their daily cleaning chores a bit more enjoyable and easier. So there's the element of impacting consumer lives and having a tangible impact. I said sustainability. As you can imagine, sustainability is big on the agenda for FMCG. As part of our daily job in R&D, as we design products and embed sustainability into product design, we can have an impact, and we can make choices that can improve the environmental impact of our products. The business thing is also important because in R&D, you have a strong impact on your top line growth. Innovation is one of the main drivers for growth, but also the bottom line, because the way we drive innovation and, for example, design products and embed the design to value into products is one of the key factors that drives margins and bottom line. So consumers' impacts on consumer sustainability and then the impact to business are probably the things that I enjoy in my R&D job in FMCG. And then, of course, I mean, if you think about FMCG and the F stands for fast, there's also the element of speed, right? And the continuous change that you need. You need to be ready and adapt and change the strategies and continue to be competitive. Because it's a tough game and it's becoming even tougher. With our competitors. Playing in the same space and driving innovations and challenging us on a daily basis.
Well, I have to tell you, Federico, as somebody who is a regular buyer of SIF, I let me thank you, because it is a very user-friendly pack. So thank you for that. I hope you hear about.
See,
that now I know the inventor of the package, so I've got a story to tell to my wife over dinner next time.
We didn't. We even use fluid dynamic simulation to optimize the design of the nozzle of that cap to minimize the dripping and clogging. There's science behind that, but also real consumer insights.
Well, as a fellow engineer, a chemical engineer, you had me at fluid dynamics, so that's what I have to say. So even more fodder for the dinner conversation. I do want to go back to and touch on your experience in India, because you mentioned that that it was a very formative time in your career, and I would love to hear more about your experience with regards to the work you did. But also, I'm just curious as to like how the market or the cultural dynamics for that consumer may have played a role.
And if I can add something, I think that normally in R&D, at least in my mind, it's like a central global function. Why would they send you to a market?
True.
Right. So let me start a bit. Like you said, I have to say it's probably been one of the most exciting experiences from a personal and from a professional growth point of view. For some reason, I read a book about China, India, and I wanted to move to a developing market. And I did manage to have that captured in my development plan. And at some point, one day, my boss came to me and he said, "Hey, we're setting up a new team in Asia." That was still household care global for Unilever, setting up a new team in Asia because there's the need to support the growth in developing markets. And clearly, there's still something we're not able to crack by leading innovations for developing markets, but sitting in Europe and having some sort of a top-down approach to product design, which was essentially, downsizing, different packaging formats instead of a bottle, a sachet, to meet the price point. But the product, the formulation inside that packaging was the same, and it was not designed to address the needs of people, for example, living in rural India. So he said, so we're thinking about setting up that team. The options could be Singapore, Shanghai, Mumbai. What's your preference? So at that point, I decided to play it safe, and I said, Singapore. I could see myself living in Singapore, and Shanghai number 2, Mumbai number 3. I always wanted to go to India on holiday. I wasn't really sure I was ready to move to India and live in India. After 2 weeks, came back to me, job is in India, take it or leave it. That was one of those moments where you just need to count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. And that's what I did. I ended up in India, and the brief was setting up a global small R&D team to support the innovations for the bottom of the pyramid consumers. So that's why I was sent to India, and actually I had to start from scratch, because when I moved to Mumbai, there was no team, there was nothing. And working closely with my marketing counterpart, we started to develop, innovation plans. I set up the team, and given the type of challenge that we had, because clearly we needed to change the approach to innovation, and instead of that top-down approach, we needed a bottom-up approach starting from real consumer needs. I also need to bring in some diversity, and actually, we ended up with a team with
a good level of diversity in terms of experience, skills, personalities, and needed also to build the capabilities to support those innovations. And by capabilities, I mean in R&D, it's crucial that you establish partnerships with external partners, especially when you don't have the internal skills, knowledge, and capabilities. And a key area of focus for us was this space of frugal design, frugal packaging, because as you can imagine, when you develop products for the bottom of the pyramid, cost becomes even more important, and you need to be very careful. And there's a nice matrix where you can map, the features that you consider when you design and develop a new product. The relevance to your consumers and the cost to you as a company, and you can use that to prioritize. But of course, you need to start then from a deep understanding of your consumers. So yeah, I think yeah. So if I look back, I mean, India for me was really developing that ability, that frugality, that is extremely important in that context. But I think, I mean, in the FMCG world, and especially the categories that I worked for and I'm working for, the attention to cost, which is not about developing, a suboptimal product, but it's really about being clear on which attributes you need to maximize and invest on. That's one of the key learnings from that experience. The concept of jugaad innovation, which is typical. I mean, there's a book, and it's very Indian, and it's the being inventive when it comes to innovation and problem solution. I think that's something that I've learned and that I continue to bring with me in my skill set. But the other one I have to say, and I mentioned that a few times, it was really about understanding consumers and developing that level of intimacy with your consumers. I spent days in rural India, for example. We adopted consumers, and we were testing prototypes and co-developing with them prototypes for products to help them clean their dishes. Imagine rural India people cooking on an open fire. Clearly, the dishwash liquid that you buy at Tesco or doesn't work, right? And besides, these people have access to proxy products that are cheaper, if not, that they come for free. So having the opportunity to work with these people and developing products in a frugal way that were meeting their needs, that was a big learning for me. And again, something that I continue to go back to because developing human-centric products is key for the success of innovation in R&D in any FMCG category. But that's, I think, something that I really learned from that experience. And it was not just India, because then we developed also solutions, and which it was combinations of product solutions and business models for Nigeria, China, Vietnam. So it was really spanning across various developing markets and consumers' needs.
And was that mainly in the household category for Unilever at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was household care category with focus on the dishwash category, surface cleaning, toilet cleaning. So yeah.
Also very impactful products on people's lives at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's products that can make a difference in terms of the end results. As you can imagine, hygiene, which is big need in those parts of the world. The other thing for me is also, so we were working a bit as a startup. So we were part of the multinational big Unilever, but agility was important, and actually we were doing a lot of experimentation, and it was the mindset was really move fast, learn fast, and then you kill fast when things are not working, or you then start to scale when things become successful, and you see the opportunity to roll out and make them bigger. So yeah, that also was extremely exciting and probably different than my experience when I then moved to the laundry category. That's a big category. 3-4 billion global turnover, and a completely different dynamics in terms of size of programs, projects, stakeholder management. But again,
it's also that contrast between global and local. No, that makes a difference. And so let's look at it from like systematic way. In your experience, how does the R&D process look like in an FMCG company? Because I also learned that there's the difference between the R and the D.
Yeah, I think so. We probably do more. I mean, in my role and with my team, we do more D than R, but there's always an R, right? I mean, in Unilever, I used to have, or we used to have, they used to have global teams focusing on the longer term technology innovation development, what was called a discovery, and then design was what I was doing, which was connecting technologies, product design, consumer needs, and then developing products, right? So yeah, in terms of process, I think you need to start from the framework, which is the three elements you need to consider when you do product innovation and development. So what you design and develop has to be desirable from a consumer point of view, viable from a business point of view, and scalable, which is again from a business point of view, right? You want to maximize the impact and the value that you bring to the business. From a process perspective, again, there's a technology push, consumer pull. Not every innovation has a technology push, but definitely it has to have a consumer pull. And for me, the starting point for the process is really about consumers and identifying the pain point, the tension that you need to resolve. And without that, I think there's no innovation, there's no successful innovation. And sometimes we need, and that's also part of my job, to remind ourselves that we need to go back to the basics, because without that, like I said, there's no successful innovation. And then, you start, and that's a bit the example that I was sharing about India, but also more recently, we developed or redeveloped our core toilet paper and launched across EMEA. It's really about starting with consumers. Toilet paper. It's about. There's unmet needs and as you can imagine, around cleaning and elevating that experience and cleaning experience. And we did a lot of consumer work and co-creation. For example, to co-develop with consumers concepts of products that were improving their experience and closing the gap to their ideal product design and product experience in the space of cleaning. So you start with that, with some fast prototyping, and that's how you address the desirability element of innovation. And then you start to run some experiments, and that's when the technology comes in, your design of experiment. And after you have defined a concept that works with consumers, then you have to translate that into product design, product attributes, and success criteria. You start the real development, again with prototyping, design of experiment, and then the magic of the technology and the innovation comes in. And then you move from pilot scale trials to commercial trials, quantitative consumer testing, which is probably the very end of your co-development process with consumers, and all of that has to come to the point where you have a viable consumer proposition, and then the scale up, which is when you execute, you launch, and that's again where we in R&D we play a big role because we will typically support the first productions, launch, qualifications of products, but also the market activation, because that's the story that we can tell consumers, and that's a toolkit that typically we in R&D develop and hand over to the local marketing teams. And by toolkits, I mean, you've got a set of claims, of product demos to bring to life the benefits of the product, and support a successful launch.
And Federico, is that generally, and I apologize if you mentioned this already, but is that something, that process, the way you described it, is that something that's fairly consistent across FMCGs, or is that something that's very unique, or is there any part of it that's unique to your current way of working at Kimberly-Clark?
I have to say there's similarities and differences because, of course, the technologies are different. And for example, I mean, the tissue products are highly impacted by process levers. Whilst, for example, there's other products. I mean, if I think about laundry products, ingredients and raw materials that you use probably have a higher impact. And that drives a bit, the way and the process you follow when it comes to development. I mean, also, a laundry liquid, it's easier to make prototypes in a small batch in a lab. When it comes to tissue, it's less easy to go to a pilot plant given the size of machines and the technologies involved. But I think overall the principles and the key steps of the process probably are very similar. Then I think the scope of the job of product development could be different. So, for example, there's organizations where it's very siloed. And you do product development, and then you do consumer technical insights, and then you do process development. There's other organizations, and like in my team, so I have to say we have a 360 approach because we develop products, but at the same time, we do some process development. We are responsible for claims, demos, and the consumer technical insights that are behind the design of products.
No, it's interesting, and I never thought of it that way in regards to both like product and process in terms of development. But I mean, I guess in my simple brain, it works out to the what versus the how in a way in terms of how you break it out. But it's fascinating to hear, like you said, in some organizations it's actually one and the same, and it's a very consistent way of doing it, as opposed to in other places where it's like you said, somewhat siloed.
They have to come together, right? Of course.
Eventually, of course.
Then, it's where the responsibility sits that could be different. But like I said, also there's categories of products that are heavily impacted by process, i.e., tissue. Other products still impacted, but probably not so much in terms of the quality of the finished product and eventually the consumer experience.
And what does your current role look like now at Kimberly-Clark? Because it is an unusual job title. So it's just to remind the audience as well, it's a Global R&D Innovation Director for International Family Care and Professional.
Pretty long, yeah. I'm responsible for product development across the categories that you mentioned. And that's essentially, your end-to-end product development that starts from front-end innovation, concept development, through to startup qualification implementation in the markets. That's essentially the scope of the role. And as we have moved towards a more centralized organization, I'm responsible for what we call EMEA, but also the new regions that I've joined the team: Latin America, Asia, ANZ. I think in my role, I have to say, and I continue to go back to consumers, is to bring in the voice of consumers and making sure that we continue to focus and develop innovations that are meaningful from a consumer point of view, but also from a business point of view. In a global role and a global organization, I think being surgical when it comes to prioritization is essential. we don't. We need to make sure that we focus on the right priorities from an innovation point of view, and we need to make sure that those innovations can travel across the regions as much as possible. Because again, it's really about also making sure that the ROI of your innovations is maximized, and that's something that probably when I was working for Unilever was more. I don't know whether it was easier, but it was more embedded in the organization and in the culture. I think, as you can imagine, as we have moved from Kimberly-Clark in the IFP organization from regional units to a central unit, it's something we're working on, and there's a lot of focus at the moment in terms of making sure that we prioritize and focus on the big bets that we can scale across the organization. And again, easier said than done, because I mentioned the example of the Steve Cream packaging, and that was the first global project for household care packaging in Unilever years ago. In a way, we did manage pretty easily. Well, there were plenty of challenges, but eventually we managed to end up with the same packaging design and specifications, some different pack sizes across the globe. In my current job and world, we need to make sure that we maximize the scale of innovation. But I have to say, we still have a pretty broad range of product specifications across the globe that are driven by a number of factors. And for example, affordability. We can't invest the same amount of money in every market, but then there's some other elements like assets, technologies that are not harmonized. But that's the complexity that we need to manage and minimize.
So, delving a little bit into, and you kind of touched on this with regards to how this, the way of working is similar or different across, your experience with Kimberly-Clark versus that at Unilever. I'm curious to understand, as somebody who I would consider to be more pragmatic than like your typical marketer, and I'll put myself into the shoe of the marketer, which is that we all like to think that, consumers spend hours debating engaging with our category, whether that be in the store or even researching online. But, the reality of it is that obviously people have busy lives, and the amount of time they actually spend engaging with our categories and our brands is actually quite limited with related to what we think. And I'm curious to get your perspective in terms of like in some of the categories you worked with. How is that? How have you kind of managed that in terms of like working in what we consider to be fairly low engagement categories?
Yeah. No, definitely, and especially, the toilet paper category, as you can imagine, is a very low engagement category. If you put yourself into consumers' shoes, it's the perception is that there's plenty of products that are good enough to do the job, and therefore, why spending more money? And that's why consumers would tend to go towards the value offering that is out there when it comes to the purchase decision. And that's, I think, it's a fact, and it's a challenge, and especially if you are in a product design innovation role, it's a big challenge that you need to address. At the same time, I think it's when you are able to crack that challenge, I think it's extremely rewarding and satisfying. So I think interestingly, low engagement, and consumers would tell you that, for example, all toilet paper it's the same and they're all good, but that's when. And I'll go back again to you really need to be consumer centric and laser focused on understanding what is the pain point that you need to solve for, and then be very clear on what's your point of difference that you want to emphasize versus your competition. Again, if I go back to the toilet paper category, everybody's talking about softness and strength, right? If you look at, our core dry bath tissue proposition, we have done a lot of work to differentiate that product, that segment, by emphasizing the cleaning benefit. And the design of the product is consistent, coherent to that proposition. So it delivers a better experience in terms of cleaning, but also the overall experience, sensorial experience, visual experience, all the touch points are converging towards that single message. And to me, again, it's really about making sure you're clear on your point of difference. You're clear on how you translate that point of difference into product attributes that are making a difference in the consumer experience. And you tell consumers a story that it's simple and it touches, well, it's a story that has to address a functional problem, but also an emotional problem, right? And it has to be, again, a simple story with no jargon, easy to understand.
And I think that excellence in brand building is really what FMCGs need to go to. Excellence in brand building, great innovation and research. That's really where you have to go to when you want to compete in this very challenging environment with obviously other brands, private label, etc., etc. So Federico, we have a question that we ask all guests. It's a famous question, which is, if you had to go back to the beginning of your career, with everything that you've learned in the meantime, which is quite a lot, what's that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I will go back to one of my favorite philosophers, Charles Handy. I don't know whether you've heard of his theory of the curve of everything. And essentially, the story is about, I mean, whether it's yourself, your personal development, a business, we all go through a curve. And as every curve, at some point you reach, the top, the plateau, and then you start to decline. And for me, it's really about understanding when you are at that point of the curve, and you need to take a jump onto the next curve, because otherwise you will start to go down. And that's for me, I mean, it's a big learning, and it's something that I've tried to apply to myself, whether it's been my personal life, my, career growth, development, approach to innovation. You always have to understand where are you in the curve, and then decide when you need to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and jump.
Love it. It's not staying in the comfort zone for many ways, no, and always be learning. So Federico, Efrain and I will try to summarize a bit the conversation. I think it was great, no, Efrain, to learn really what R&D looks like in companies, because sometimes, since we do more marketing and so on, it may seem like all the innovation comes from marketing, but obviously it's not necessarily the case.
It's a team effort, right? Innovation, it doesn't come only from marketing, but there's a strong partnership between R&D and marketing, and it's up to you to decide also how you want to build a partnership, right?
Yeah.
But I think we in R&D can play a significant role in terms of driving innovation and connecting with the marketing, our marketing partners, to make sure that we deliver innovations that contribute to the growth of the business and your top line and bottom line, and it's aligned to the strategy.
Yeah, 100%. And what I love about these kinds of conversations when we have people from outside of marketing as guests is that it's always an education, right? And what I've loved about our conversation today has been that although it's not a function that either one of us are innately familiar with, it's all grounded in very simple principles that we can all understand, right? In terms of understand what's the pain point that you're trying to address. Thinking about those 3 elements of product innovation. I mean, I loved how even for our simple marketing brains, it was still something that we could grasp and we can get, and it's also applicable in marketing in a lot of ways as well. So I've really enjoyed that. But Daniel, what's your perspective in terms of some of the takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it as Federico was saying, it's a team effort. So one thing I've learned definitely is that it depends on the industry, but it also depends a lot on the company structure, the company culture, the company governance of how that innovation gets done, who has more influence, who has more of a say.
Yeah, absolutely. I go back to what I said just a second ago, which is that I really liked how you distilled down to those three elements of product innovation. And again, I think it's something that's very, it's something that I'm going to apply in something that's completely unrelated to this R&D discussion, but it's about, be desirable, be viable, and be scalable. Those are very foundational things that we should all be asking ourselves, regardless of whether we work in R&D or we work in marketing. So for me, that was just a really good takeaway. The other thing for me that I really enjoyed was what you said towards the end of our conversation, which is how you distilled it down in regards to starting with what is the point of difference, then thinking about translating that to product attributes, and then going to a simple story that's jargon free, that's addresses both functional and emotional benefits. Again, something that I think any marketer could take to heart and be able to apply in their day to day.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious, but sometimes I think it's really reminding ourselves that we need to go back to those basics. And I think if I look at some of the innovations that we've implemented recently at Kimberly-Clark and this low engagement dry bath tissue category, by applying those principles, we have been able to hold share throughout, economic crises, with products that, of course, are sold at a premium price, but, consumers are understanding the value of, paying for that premium price because of the point of difference and experience that we offer.
Excellent. Well, look, I think that I don't have much more to add here. Thanks so much, Federico, for joining us. Efrain, a great learning as always from other functions. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.